Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Good morning everyone. My name is Putri Samalia with student number J1E020027. In this opportunity, I would like to share my understanding based on my reading in journal the pragmatic analysis of Deixis in Avenger Endgame. Well, this study aims to determine the type of Deixis Avenger Endgame, which to explain the function of each types of Deixis based on Deixis theory of Levinson. And the focus in this study is Deixis in Avenger Endgame by Marvel Studios, which are some reason that makes this film interesting to analyze, such as this film is booming all circles like children, adult, and beside the conversation in this film contains conversation that are similar to everyday conversation or daily conversation, such as offering something, asking for something, asking or answering a question. This film is also contains Deixis. Another reason is that the film's Avenger Endgame is a continuation of film Avengers Infinity War. Because of that, there are several utterances in the film Avengers Endgame, which refer to a character or an incident in the film Avengers Infinity War. Or it can be concluded that this research is important to do because it is useful for adding insight and understanding about speech, such as who is appointed in the utterance, and what is the meaning of the purpose of the utterance. Beside, the conversation will run more smoothly if the speaker and listener understand the meaning of each other's utterance. Well, this research used to describe a qualitative method. According to Creswell, qualitative study is a study in the form of an approach to explore and understand the meaning of individuals and group that are related to social human problems. Well, uh, in this in this research, data is collected in the form of participant arrangement. Data analysis is carried out inductively by building from the smallest details to a general theme. Then the study interprets the meaning of the data. And the research used a film title with title Avenger Endgame and the subject as the subject of this study. This research focused on the utterance of the characters in the film Avenger Endgame, which contain Deixis. While the study used data in dialogue from in the movie Avengers Endgame by Marvel Studios, there are some steps to obtain valid data as stated below. The first is watching the film Avengers Endgame, looking for the script and match with the film. Then collecting the data that contain Deixis, then grouping data by the type of Deixis such as person Deixis, place Deixis, time Deixis, or social Deixis and discourse Deixis. And the last is reducing data. It aims to avoid same finding. Well, data have been selected will be analyzed by using theory. The stage are identify the type of Deixis such as present Deixis, time Deixis, place Deixis, discord Deixis, and social Deixis. And the second is identify the function of Deixis, and the third is analyze and describe the contextual meaning of Deixis based on physical context, linguistic context, social context, and epistemic context. And the last is make conclusion from findings. Well, according to Levinson, there are five types of Deixis, including person Deixis, time Deixis or spatial Deixis, and spatial Deixis or place Deixis, discord Deixis, and social Deixis. In the study, there are 33 data that will be displayed. The first is person Deixis. First person deixis is the word spoken by the speaker to point himself. The word I is subject and a singular pronoun. The word me is an object and the word my is a word that refers to ownership. In addition to the words I, me, and my, the word we, our, and us also belong the first person of deixis. For example, Tony Stark said, yeah, I lost the kid. The location in this cane is in courtyard. The Avengers are gathering. Steve Rogers, Natasha Romanoff, Bruce Banner, and James Rhodes ran outside this to see something that was about to land from the sky. Carol landed the Predator, which is a spaceship. The aircraft, well, are attached when making a landing. The airplane doors open. Tony and Nebula came out. Tony is being carried away by Nebula. Steve went to Tony and helped him up. Tony grabbed Steve's arms and then walked side by side with Steve. The sentence was delivered by Tony Stark. The word I in the uterus is a singular pronoun from first person deixis. The function of the uterus is a subject appoint speakers itself. Well, the second person deixis is the word used of the speaker point one or more addresses there that are the object of the conversation. The word included in the second person deixis are the words you and the words your. For example, Carol said that there are a lot of other planets in the universe, and unfortunately, they didn't have you guys. The situation on in this case is when Carol in the room with Natasha, Bruce Banner, Rudy, Steve, and Thor and Nebula. Carol wants to kill Thanos alone, but is prevented by Natasha because Natasha wants them to work together in defeating Thanos. Then they find out Thanos is aware about make a plan to defeat Thanos. The uterus above said by Carol then first, the word you in the uterus belongs to the second person deixis. The function the word of you is to point people in the room, including Steve Rogers, Rudy, Nebula, Natasha, Thor, and Bruce Banner. And the next is third person deixis is a word that refers to a person which who is not identified as a speaker or listener. The word include the third person deixis are called singular person pronoun are he, she, and they. While the words included in the third person are called plural personal pronoun in the form of him, her, and them. For example, Tony Stark said he is unbeatable. The situation as this can is when the Avengers are gathered in a room and talking about Thanos. Tony was sitting at a table, drawing blood for healing while holding the report on the victim listed on the holographic. The statement above was spoken by Tony Stark. The word he in the uterus belongs to the third person deixis. The word he in the uterus has a function to point at Thanos. Well, the next is time deixis. Time deixis is related to encoding a temporal points of the spoken or written message. For example, Thor said, "Where to start? Either first is not a stone. Someone called it a stone before. It is more of an angry, slow thing. So, someone gonna need to amend that." The situation in this case is when the Avengers are in a room where there is a hologram displaying 6 Infinity Stones. They sit around a table. Tony, Steve, and Bruce lead a discussion about planning a mission to recover the Infinity Stone. Thor, who was wearing his sunglasses, sat on a chair and fell asleep. After that, Thor woke up. The statement above the spoken by Thor, the word before is included in the time deixis. The function of the word before in the uterus is to point time in the past. Well, The next is a place Deixis. Place Deixis use two verbs of place such as this and here for something that near or close to the speaker, and that there or those and there for something beside or close to the listener. For example, Nebula said, Thanos is there. The situation in this case is when Steve, Natasha, Roddy, Nebula, Rocket, Thor are discussing while Thanos is. Then the rocket points to a planet that is in a hologram. The planet Thanos is in. The uterus is spoken by Nebula. The word there in the uterus belongs to the place they exist that is close to the listener. The function of the word there above is to point the place of Thanos. The next is discourse deixis. The didactic phrase used by these deixis are this, which refers to an upcoming part, and that to a former part. For example, the Steve Rogers said, "That's why it's yours." Buck is a mile and he looked at Sam. Then he walked over to the old man and immediately recognized him. Steve Rogers turned old. Then they talked about Steve's journey when returning Infinity Stones. Then Steve gave Bucky the heat shield. The sentence above was spoken by Steve Rogers. The word that belongs to the discourse deixis. The function of the word that is to indicate the reason Rogers gave his shield to Sam Wilson. And the next is social deixis. There are two kinds of social deixis, such as rational social deixis and absolute social deixis. Relational social deixis refers to some social characteristics and features of different apart from the reference to a social relationship between the speaker and the listener. For example, my husband, nephew, son, and etc. Absolute social deixis is refers to deictic reference include, for example, Your Highness, Mr. President, Your Majesty, or etc. In this study, social deixis data found were 48 data. While I give you one example, there are Thor said, "I'm counting on it, Your Majesty." Thor and Valkyrie are in the New Asgard. Valkyrie requests that Thor return to New Asgard and becoming king of New Asgard. The sentence was spoken by Thor. The word Your Majesty is the utterance belongs to absolute social deixis. The function of the word Your Majesty in the above statement is to point Valkyrie. For in the study found five types of deixis and their function. The five types include person deixis, time deixis, place deixis, social deixis, and discord deixis, with a total of 1,778 data. Person deixis is divided into three kinds. They are first person deixis, second person deixis, and third person deixis. The function of deixis is to point objects such as people, place, or times. The reference depending on the context of the sentence or utterance. I think that's all for my understanding about deixis and the analysis of this journal. Thank you for your attention. Wassalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.